Okay. 8 golden rules for AR design. 8 golden rules for AR design. So the first rule, identify your audience and their needs. So you have to understand who's going to use your AR apps and what is their requirement. So it is essential to remember that AR experience is not about technology, it's about people. People don't care about technology. All they want is an experience. That's why we should not prioritize technology over experience. Why do people start using new technology in the first place? The answer is simple. Technology helps people do the things they usually do, but more efficiently. And by efficiently, we mean in a way that's faster, more productive, with fewer errors. If your goal is to design meaningful and usable experience for your users, start with thinking about them. Invest in user research, meet with people who represent your target audience, conduct a series of interviews, show some samples of your future product, and observe their reactions. This is the reason why I keep asking you to communicate with your co-supervisors, because the co-supervisors in this class will acting as your client who is involved either as your potential users or closely related to your potential users. Second rule is to validate your hypothesis. While this point sounds way too obvious, many product teams skip the step where the team should validate whether the product brings value to users or not. To create a truly valuable experience, you need to think about how the product you create will fit into your users' daily life. If you have a hard time imagining how the product will align with users' needs, most probably your product will never be used. To improve your chances of success, use storyboarding to show how users will use AR. By using storyboarding, you will see a real story of interactions with the product in the real-world environment. When you have a specific place for interactions, you will be able to consider all the constraints this place has. This is the reason also in this class, in the subject, I keep saying to you, do your storyboard, write your storyboard. And actually for this class, we have 2 questionnaires. One is for you to initially understand what the requirement from users, whereby you have to write a questionnaire and you show your storyboard. And then at the end of this semester, you will have the user acceptance test, whereby you also have a questionnaire to check the acceptance of the users. But unfortunately, because of our scenario, we missed the first part. Yeah? And again, for the storyboarding, usually when we draw a storyboard, we always draw the storyboard that related to the interface. Actually, not just the interface, also how to use your apps. You have to draw in your storyboard how user will use, in what situations the user will use your apps. The third rules is understand your user's environment. Another important thing you should remember while designing for AR is that AR is about user environment, because it's augmented. It's combinations of virtuals and reality. So when designing, try not to be too attached to a phone. Instead, try to think about the user environment. Where will the users experience your apps? The better your app integrates with the user environment, the better experience your users will have. So focus on the user's experience and think about users' environment. Okay, if you're doing an education app, right, for schools, then you have to think whether this app will be used in the class or at home. And if it's in a class, is it one each of the students or together with the teacher, right? And if you do for the medical educations, right, then you have to ask yourself or ask your supervisors, your apps will be used in the class or in their own home or in their own room doing by themselves. And if it's in the class, the same thing also, whether it will be used in a group or only each of the students. All these you have to understand. You have to check the requirement, look into the environment when actually your users will use your apps. Then the third rule is to understand your user's environment. Okay, sorry, continue with the understand user environment. Then you have to look into the surfaces. Think about how your app can adapt to different surfaces. If you use frameworks like AR Core, you can use a built-in features of surface detections. The app can understand the floor, walls, and objects such as tables. But for you, you're using marker for this class, so you don't have to identify the surface. Just make sure your marker is easy to detect. The light estimation is very important to make the object realistic in the scene. Try to use dynamic lights with real-time shadows. So, okay, in this class, we don't really focus on the light, yeah, because the scope is on the AR, but you're supposed to think about the light also. So try to use light when you're developing your object in a Blender and then transform it to Unity and Vuforia. You have to understand, try to use the light that will look real, but estimate the light and then use the real-time shadows. Okay. Space required. Users can experience AR in 3 different sizes: table scale, room scale, and open environment. The user should always have enough space to enjoy the experience. Thus, you should think about that even before the user starts using the app. For example, if your app requires an open environment, tell the user that they need more space up front before they start using your product. So you have to understand where, again, the environment of your users. Are they using it in a small room or in a big hall or outside? Then you have to design your apps according to these environments. Single user versus multi-users. If you design a multi-user experience, you need to design your product in a way that ensures everyone's engaged. It is important to give users a feeling of connections. For example, if you design an AR game, you might want to provide a map that demonstrates your users' locations and provides real-time notifications about their current status. Okay, so for this class, we only focus on the single user, but if you later on might be you need to use multi-user, then you have to design all these users connect to each other, right? So this note suggested to use map or notifications. At least they know they relate, they connect to each other. The fourth rule, design for user movement. When we design AR experience, it's also worth remembering that users can move while experiencing AR, and the app should be adapted for the change, right? Remember that not just your phone is moving, not just the marker is moving, your user also move. So if you want to create a truly immersive experience, we need to design beyond the boundaries of the device. Your ultimate goal should be making people believe that the object they see is actually there. So you have to design the object that pop up through your AR look really real, and even the user cannot identify whether it is real or not because it's so real. Some AR experience require user movement as a form of interactions. For example, when we provide an AR model of a building, the user might want to see it from different sides. So sometimes we have to create user have to move to look at your object. Okay, let's say you pop up a building and you want to see the left and the right, or you pop up a chair that you design, so user need to want to see the whole object. So the user have options whether to move the marker or move the tablet or your devices, or they themselves move around. So make sure people feel comfortable when they interact with elements of AR by doing the following. Limit number of objects in user focus area. User attention is a precious resource. We don't want to waste it. Ideally, the user's attention should be on particular object. You should avoid situations where a few different objects fight for user attentions, because in most cases, the user will have a terrible experience. Don't put up a lot of models or 3D or object in one scene. It will compete to each other and user will get confused which one they need to focus. Use the correct scale and proportions for object. This makes it easy for the user to distinguish AR object from a distance. So properly design, make sure it's a really correct scale and the proportion is correct. Good graphics, when the users come near an object, it should not become schematic. So of course you need to build a very good 3D models with a very good rendering. Do not clutter the viewport. Avoid placing too many 2D controls on the screen. Yeah. So avoid use too much of a button or whatever interactions in one scene. When users experience AR, they usually focus more on the scene and the object of interactions, and they tend to pay less attention to UI controls. Thus, they can even miss the control unless you need to provide the critical UI control, such as control with high frequency of use, try to rely on gesture. So it depends on your client or your potential users. And most of them more focused on the object itself. Yeah? They don't really look into the control or the button. So you make sure there's not so much button and make sure simple interaction, simple control. Prevent change blindness. Every time a new object appears in a visible area of viewport, you should try to prevent change blindness when users do not notice new objects. So make sure all the new object can be seen. The user can see all these objects in a viewport. Use meaningful motion and animated effect to make the transition predictable for users. So jangan do not use sudden display or sudden transitions, so that user make it as a user can predict what next. So they have, the communications between users and your apps is smooth. They know what's going on. Avoid full screen takes over. Avoid elements that suddenly appear on the user viewport and block their experience. First, any unexpected object in viewport create distractions and break the flow. So make sure when you create video, either the normal video or AR video, you please make sure that it's not cover the whole viewport or take over the display. Yeah? So you have to design probably. If you say that you want to make sure the whole screen in video, make sure it will not block the experience of the users. Second, it ruins the sense of emotions. It becomes evident that the AR world is not real. So when you design and you let something display take over the experience, the feeling of emotions will be gone, will be lost, and it will become a normal apps. Even when you want to show an error message, try to make it subtle. Onboard your users. Ultimate goal is to create a zero learning curve. Onboarding is something that will help you to achieve this goal. It's vital to make the onboarding process as clear as possible so the user understands exactly how to use the app. Stay away from static walkthrough tours. Static walkthrough work equally badly for traditional mobile apps and AR apps. Usually people skip such tours in the attempt to experience to app themselves. It might way much better to follow the show, do not tell approach. So do not use static walkthrough tours like a tutor. You want them to walk through so that they understand. No, don't do that, because some people will ignore that. They prefer to go straight, use your apps. Yeah? So make sure your apps is simple, straight to the points. At the same time, you did not missing the experience, the user experience. A user should reach a camera view as soon as possible. Do not explain the advantages of using the AR app. Show it. Yeah, you don't have to explain whether in the apps or you explain to users. No, just make it work. Use the camera in scanning mode and provide contextual tips. So this is the sample of the last year mobile AR apps. You can see it's about the kidney, and a very simple one button. Then you have choices, yeah, and then all about the kidney and do the explanations. And there's a button there, a lot of button, but it's very structured. Oops, where did it stop? So you can see here, the movement is showing to the people where is the object will be, where is the, which part will be the 3D models. And use virtual label. So you can see there's also button to exit, button home. Quiz, through a simple quiz, true and false, simple symbol. So the rules is very simple. One, the most important thing is the experience, user experience. No matter what you design, if you lost that user's experience element, the AR will not be accepted. Yeah? So please make sure that put the first point, user experience. So I think I'm stopped here. Thank you very much indeed.